Hey, really glad to see you today. And I just had an amazing conversation recently with Jason Pike. He's actually Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army retired Jason Pike. And the reason we were having a conversation was because I started having recorded conversations with people who have experienced toxicity, toxic systems in one form or the other, and have proven resilience, alchemized this trauma, maybe realized the soul evolution as a result. And now I'm bringing them forward to you guys. So the reason I wanted to talk about Jason is because he was my very first conversation, and it just was posted this week. And I was really happy the way that the conversation turned out. He flunked the first grade, like straight out flunked. He wasn't the wisest kid. He sounds like he had a little bit of ADHD issue going on. And so at 17, he decided to sign up for the military. And he went into the reserves because he was, by then, he was like in a 11th grade in high school. So he'd have to go like weekends and, in the summer. Well, his basic boot camp training was like horrendous, guys, like horrendous. His drill sergeant saw through that he may not be the best candidate for the military and tried to get him out. Like, I guess for people that don't exactly perform and they want to sort of bump them out early, they send them to a specific training camp that's freaking abusive as crap. Like, I'm probably the wrong one to be talking about this because I was so terrified growing up as a kid that my oldest brother would be drafted. And I remember I used to sit in my closet in the dark and try to think about how I could get him to Canada to escape before he would have to go into the military. That's how afraid of it I was. I'm afraid of any kind of violence, any kind of combat. Like I can't watch Full Metal Jacket. I can't watch those kinds of movies. Actually, once I had to do a junket when Steven Spielberg had just done Saving Private Ryan. So, members of the press, they all get together and go to a screening of the film that's about to come out. And we had to go to DreamWorks, and the sound was like unbelievable, bullets everywhere. I remember I don't even know how I stayed in that room for the 3 hours plus or whatever it was that movie was. And then the next day, we had to go to the Four Seasons Hotel, and each star that's in the movie and Steven Spielberg, the director, have their own suite. And then you go in one at a time and interview them. This was a horrendous experience for me, like totally horrendous. I can't even imagine doing what Jason Pike did and enlisting at 17. Um, but anyway, he told an amazing story of how he was not going to quit. His parents didn't want him to go into the military, and he was really discouraged. It was sort of bottom of the bucket to enlist. And obviously, his superiors in the army really saw him that way too, but he wasn't going to quit. He wasn't going to let this abuse push him back. So he did succeed ultimately, and he did serve. And this guy that like blew first grade and couldn't really get his shit together, excuse my language, in boot camp, ended up becoming a lieutenant colonel. Like it is amazing, and led troops into live combat all over the Middle East, specifically Afghanistan as well. Like horrendous, right? You think that's got to be the worst thing going. No, he goes on to tell me that it wasn't that time of actual combat was his biggest nightmare. His biggest nightmare was serving behind a desk in Seoul, Korea, like probably towards the end of his 31 years, when the toxic system that surrounded him like went after him. They just decided they didn't like him, and they couldn't really throw him out. So You'll have to listen to the first podcast episode because it's really an interesting story of what happens to Jason and how he independently goes within himself. Like he had an intuitive knowing when he arrived on this base, because he had been on that base a couple other times during his career. He just knew something was off and something was was wrong. And he was right. And he had to learn how to cope and move through it because he wasn't about to lose his retirement after, decades of service and reaching the position he did. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because I believe that's what's here on earth for all of you. It certainly was for me. I definitely was in some tight circumstances that were not pleasant to experience. But ultimately, I trusted that inner voice that I could identify. The times that I listened to it, I was capable of moving through this abuse or the toxic system, whether it was in, my ancestral line and in my direct family, whether it was in my schooling, which was not an education, it was, being told how to think and what to think, whether it was in my religious upbringing, which gave me an incredibly strong faith. But like, I remember sitting in the pew, just like staring the priest down, going, thinking inside of my mind, don't you dare tell me I need a broker to speak to God. I talk to him out in my backyard whenever I want. I don't need to listen to you to get to God. But all these sort of toxic circumstances that we find ourselves in, if we're really able to take a slow breath and understand, yeah, there is something that I can transform, that I can alchemize, and ultimately that I can learn from this experience. It will really serve me ultimately and big picture. And that's what Jason found. This guy that had him out for him, I mean, called him out as a pedophile and then brought a case against him for basically treason, like with no no reason, but drug him through hell for 2 years. He saw the other side of this guy. This was his world, and Jason had sort of just made a little disconcerting remark about publishing papers while he was within this division. And that's what he lives for. That's his identity, his form identity. And, Jason realized after going through this, yeah, that was what was up with this guy. Wow, thank God I wasn't tromping in his boots, and he could extricate himself. And ultimately, all cases brought against him were dropped. And that's a very similar experience that I have had. The times that I've been strong enough to say, okay, yeah, I'm a victim of this sexual harassment in the workplace. It's clear, but I'm going to speak up regardless of circumstances. And when I did speak up, I was promptly fired. That led me within 2 months to opening my own firm, matching celebrities to brands, becoming known for that, becoming well regarded for that, and then ultimately leading me into producing for television and film. But if I didn't stand up to the truth, speak the truth, accept the consequences, I did let myself, lie in victim mode for at least a couple of hours because I was 25. I was in New York. I had nobody to depend on. I didn't have a trust fund. It was the 2.5 months of cash I had in the bank, and ultimately stood up to it and moved through it. And it changed my life. Just like standing up, moving through it has changed Jason's life. He's now a 3-time author. He's got his memoir out about his experience as a soldier. And he has another book about what it's like when you come out of the military system. And then his third book is Leading Through the Crossfire. in the crossfire were not the bullets on the battlefield. It was what he experienced in that office in Seoul. So there's a link below to the complete version of that conversation. I'm going to continue to have conversations with people that have experienced toxic systems, have looked them or straight into the eyes and have come through them with a story to tell and a bit of soul evolution, because that's what we're facing in these times. I mean, look at what is happening. Our toxic systems are being unthreaded. They're shredded. They're being revealed. And I'm not talking about, whether you like the way one side handles it or the other. That is not even a point to me anyway. To me is, okay, what is my experience? What do I feel about this? What's important to me? What do I want to express? And I've lived decades with not even going there. I've basically been mum and shut down inside, living from the outside in, pleasing others for approval, making everything smooth and safe so I could feel loved and not abandoned, which turned out to be false ultimately. It's really been taking me into a deep place inside my own heart where I can connect with that exquisite light and beauty and power that you have in there. I know you have it in there because I have it in there. It just took me decades to really uncover it on such a deep level that there was nobody that could bash me around the playing field anymore. As a matter of fact, when those challenging situations came, I wasn't quite as fearful. I was like, okay, here comes another lesson. What am I going to learn from this one? How am I going to move through this? What support do I need? And I'm really encouraging you along the same path. So check out the link to the new conversations. Also, there's plenty of tools at susangold.us. And there's a newsletter that's it's going on quite a bit, like probably twice a month now, because people are responding to it. I really feel this is a time that we need to know you are in this with me and with others, and we can walk through this one day at a time. This cacophony, this insanity, this tumult, this chaos is going to alchemize and bring us to a place that we never knew existed because we've been so entrained into this malignancy, into these accepting these toxic systems. Yeah, time to step on out. So, really good to spend time with you today. Take good care. Make sure you're breathing, drinking your water, and getting outside. Get out of the living room. It makes a huge difference. Okay, take good care, and I'll see you next time.